And welcome back to We Are the People. This is your host, Jason Preston, and we're all in great luck because we got Chelsea again. How we doing, Chelsea?
We're good. How are you doing?
We are glad to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Chelsea is obviously, I think the thing that makes this show cool is it's the people that come on and the people that, Chelsea, and it's the guests we have, and we've got an incredible guest today. We're going to get into the mobile driver's license. It's one of those things that most of you guys who are paying attention, you see people all over the world very concerned about it, and rightfully so. We're going to talk about why you should be concerned, what's out there right now, and what's coming. And to me, this is a very important conversation, and we have someone who's very qualified to talk. He's been helping write legislation, so I think he's probably one of the most qualified people to help us understand this. Thank you guys for all the support. We've had some very hard-hitting shows lately, and we are very concerned about the potential of the channel getting taken down because of some of the things we're stirring up. Please make sure you go to our website, wearethepeople.org, scroll down and subscribe so that we can get you content no matter what. This show is brought to you by Timothy LeBlue. Honestly, this is you guys. That's what's so cool. So many of you guys just helping us out with our billboards, helping us out with getting the show together, helping us out bringing out content, sharing it. So thank you guys for all you do. And let's rock and roll, and let's have Chelsea, if you want to introduce our guest.
Yes, I'm super excited to have him here. This is Timothy Ruff. He's a pioneer in the decentralized identity industry. I know we've done shows on that before. So he is the Chief Strategy Officer at Digital Trust Venture Partners. It's a venture studio focused on better securing digital interactions. In this role, Timothy has co-founded Provenant Credential Master, Health Carry, One Bedrock CRE, and the Verifiable Trade Foundation, all leaders in their respective fields. That's a lot. Prior to DDVP, Timothy co-founded self-sovereign identity pioneer Evernym, where he served as the CEO, and he is the co-inventor of Sovereign and Hyperledger Indie Technologies and the originator of GLEIF and VLEI for globally authoritative organizational identity. So super expert in the field. And I know we've done a few shows, if you've seen them before, on, the digital ID and the verifiable credentials and the concerns that we have with that, the blockchain. So we've got an expert with us to help us kind of talk that out today. So super excited that you're here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea. So Timothy, awesome. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Nice to meet you both.
Yeah, we've had a few conversations, and he's been very helpful about informing us on this topic because he knows it's important to us and to our audience. And I just really appreciate all the conversations because you've opened my eyes and helped me see things that I didn't understand before. So let's start with this. I think most of our audience will be very curious to know what is currently going on right now with digital ID or mobile driver's license. Maybe what we can start with, and I think we've got two experts. I'd consider you both experts. What's currently out there? What is the status of it? And is there concerns with it? So, Timothy, let's start with you. What's out? What is out there right now?
Very broad question because everywhere that we have to prove who we are online, we have to do so with some kind of identifier. Usually it's an email address. Sometimes it's a username and a password to get into something. And for the most part, traditionally, it's been from private industry. It's some big tech company that gives us an email address and a phone number or username and password to get into their system. And that's why we have so many usernames and passwords and so many different logins to different places, is because we don't actually have one that is our own that we can use in many places. And the digital identities that we use to access these services were not given to us by government. And it's really interesting because in the physical world, the identities that we use to prove who we are were given to us by government. Our passport by the federal government, and in the United States, we have a very strong state-based government. In other countries, it's a national, a federal identity system. We really don't have a strong federal identity system. Our Social Security number doesn't really prove anything about who we are It's really our driver's license for the most part, and sometimes a passport in the United States, which is government. But when you go into the digital realm, government has not been playing ball yet. We really don't have any identity from government. We don't have our own separate from government. So really, all the digital identities that we have to use to access things online are given to us by private companies. You know, Amazon to get into Amazon, Facebook to get into Facebook, and times 100. We have hundreds of these different logins. So what's happening now is government starting to get into the digital identity business all over the world. China is getting into the digital identity business for their citizens. The EU is getting into the digital identity business for their citizens. Australia is accelerating their digital identity system. So country after country is starting to implement digital identity systems. And the most popular method right now around the world, based on an international standard, is called, you mentioned it, the MDL, the Mobile Driver's License. Utah has already adopted the MDL. There's probably 100,000 Utahns who've gone out and gotten the electronic version of a mobile driver's license. And if I can just give my opinion, because it's not a fact that it's a bad thing. It's really a cultural thing. In some cultures, they're totally fine. In fact, they require surveillance. And they would not even tolerate a digital identity system that did not provide surveillance. China, for example, they're out front about that. There's no question from their citizens they're being surveilled. That's just part of their cultural environment. In other places, it's more of a gray area. I would say the EU and Australia are more of a gray area where they don't like surveillance, but they tolerate it far more than we would tolerate it here in Utah. There's also states in our good old US of A who are tolerant of levels of surveillance that we would never allow in Utah. So there's a cultural difference. But the main thing I guess I would say about the mobile driver's license, it enables surveillance. And that's the bottom line. It enables surveillance. It can be implemented in a mode that doesn't surveil. Utah has it implemented in a mode where it can surveil. There's two different modes. It can switch between them. And one I like to call privacy mode, and the other one's called surveillance mode. They're technically called device retrieval and server retrieval, but I think it's fair to call one privacy mode and the other one surveillance mode, and it can be implemented either way. And I honestly don't think the leaders in Utah, we really didn't have a strong privacy initiative, privacy commission, and privacy understanding about when we adopted the MDL. I think if you knew, if other people knew, maybe you already knew and made some videos about it, but I think if it was more broadly known, the capabilities to surveil that this system has, I don't think it would be in Utah. So I think it's really important we start to tell people what's happening and what's about to happen with this extra $500,000 that was just allocated.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think, so one of my big concerns, and I love having you here because you're the expert in kind of the inner workings of how the capabilities of this technology kind of works. But my big concern has been really in moving toward, I mean, the driver's license itself, obviously, like you said, it has concerns in itself. But when we pass HB 471 and our digital wallet and verifiable credentials went onto that blockchain, and it's like you said, it isn't government that's actually creating it. We've partnered with the private sector, and in doing so, and we've gone over this with the show, I can put some slides up again, but like Amelia Powers, who's part of the United Nations. And
also Utah County Commissioner.
Yeah. Government Blockchain Association. People like this are in our task force. Ian Mayer, who is Nicholas Carey's #1 guy. Nicholas Carey is the co-founder of the United Nations Blockchain. These people are on our Utah government task force who've been appointed by Cox. And so they're putting our mobile license, you know, the digital ID and the digital wallet that is connected to this MDL onto this blockchain system that is being created by a partnership with the United Nations and our government. So you've got the United Nations with this capability, you know, all of this technology capability of how they're building this out, and they're very much involved in tracking and surveilling in partnership with government, who really has the policing power. over this, and I played audio clips. I can insert an audio clip here again.
Sure.
We can send it. But one of the guys that Cox tasked to help build this out said, as government, we should be able to give these credentials and this wallet out, and we should also be able to revoke it. And I showed slides where the working group with the UN that Amelia Powers is working with is talking about eliminating privileges, just like the social credit score we see in China. This is how they're building it on our mobile driver's license here in Utah on this blockchain. So certain privileges, energy, water meters, whatever it is, your credit card gets shut off at the store because you did something government doesn't agree with, they'll shut you off. So those are my concerns.
Yeah, you said a lot of great points. I appreciate you sharing that, Timothy and Chelsea. One of the things that stuck out to me is you said, there's certain things that China is comfortable with, and that the rest of the country, the rest of the world's not comfortable, right? I mean, they live in the surveillance state, the social credit system, where if they catch you jaywalking, your social credit score is down, and it affects, maybe even your ability to purchase things. I mean, it's complete control. You talked about the EU and Australia and what they're doing with their digital ID, and then you said, Utah is not comfortable with surveillance. I kind of feel like, I think the people I would agree with you and say the people in Utah are not comfortable with surveillance, the surveillance state. But from my perception, it seems like our state has been implementing a lot of surveillance. Mm-hmm. I understand that. I don't know. Do you guys know the status? I know one of the bills right now is the driver's license scanner, the flock. We've addressed it on the top 5 bad bills, but I know they're trying to pass legislation where they can track vehicles, and so I feel like as in Chelsea. We've done shows on it, but I feel like Utah, our legislators have pushed so much surveillance the people have no idea about, which is why I appreciate, Timothy, you coming on and talking about this. So let's talk specifically about the current Utah mobile driver's licenses. How many did you say are out there right now, approximately?
It's probably 100,000 people using it. Yeah.
And obviously the idea is that number is going to grow and eventually translate to until all of us are on that, or as many as possible. One of the things we've talked about in the past is that that was very alarming to me is that the current driver's license, the mobile, has phone home capabilities. Tell us what that means and why our listeners, because I just think this is a discussion that needs to be out in the public square. I feel like these conversations are not being held in the public. I think they're being held with our legislators, but it's not being held with the people who again, this is a government of the people and by the people, and yet the people themselves have no idea about this discussion. So I just really want you guys to hear these things so that we can have discussion, and then we can then take that discussion to our representatives and tell them how we want them to represent us. So tell us about the phone home capabilities, and what does that mean, and why do you see that as a concern?
Absolutely. So you used a really good word a moment ago that I want to emphasize, and that is, what is the danger of surveillance? The danger of surveillance is ultimately control. It's what can a government power do when they have complete surveillance capability? Well, they're just waiting for an emergency. As soon as there's an emergency, then they exercise that control to take freedom away, take life and liberty away from people, and however they think it's necessary.
How?
So I'm 100% with you.
How do you like to our listeners? Because how do you see them being able to do that with surveillance? How does surveillance allow them to do that?
In the world of digital identity, I'm going to just kind of game out what I predict or think the dystopian potential is.
Okay.
There's a whole genre of thought within the digital identity community about the weaponization of identity, going back to what happened to the Jews and the Holocaust, and how the Jewish identity system was actually very robust. And when the Nazis came and took over that system, it enabled them to very quickly get to all of the people and know everything they knew, because it was all on paper. This is pre-computers.
IBM.
It was a very robust system. So there's a very real history of government weaponizing identity systems against people. whether it's paper or whether it's digital, government's going to do what government does, right? When they have control, they use it. When they have a big button to press, they press it. So, but let's separate that. I'll let you talk about the potential consequences more. That's more of a crystal ball of what could happen or what might happen. What I want to do maybe is answer your first question about what is phone home? What is it that gives them this surveillance capability, and how can we take that tool out of their hand so that when the inevitable emergency comes again, when there's another COVID, that gives them the excuse to press the button, that there's no button to press. That's where I'm going. I don't want them to have a button to press. So phone home is when, if I have a digital identity on my device and I take that and I go use it to purchase some liquor. Okay, I'm buying some liquor. I'm doing it in person, or I'm buying wine online, which is the thing. You buy wine online. And I go, and if I am being surveilled and the state decides, Timothy, you've been buying a little too much wine lately. Sorry, we have limits on this, or this is a little weird, or whatever. For any reason, they could make it so that my identity does not verify.
So in other words, when you go to the store or go online and they ask for ID and you put your ID up, on their end, they get a
like a red X.
No,
Yeah.
he's not allowed.
That's the control. And so that control extends as far as I use my digital identity. So if I use, okay, is this better?
Yeah.
He's good. I can hear him.
The more places I use my digital identity, the more points of control a surveillance system would have. And this is what is so insidious about this new $500,000 appropriation, because it explicitly is intended to expand the usefulness of the MDL to things like online shopping and online banking and renting cars. They actually use those three use cases in their defense of why they're doing it. And they're not doing it so they can surveil those things. I believe that the people that are asking for that have good intentions, and they want the MDL to be more useful for people. But when you game this out, the more places you use a digital identity that has surveillance capability within it, the more points of control that surveiller will have over you if they ever choose to use it. That's the risk.
So in a world where we're moving more towards DEI and towards this being carbon credits and
Yeah.
where we see so much more control coming from these global organizations and our wanting to monitor our meat consumption and monitor what we're eating. This mobile ID would enable them to see everything we buy. And I think one of the things that you talked about when you talk about phone home is so when you take your ID and you show it to the clerk or to whoever it is, what happens is when they scan it, it goes back to the state. The state gives them thumbs up or thumbs down, and then it comes back, and then at that point they let you in or give you access.
Correct. Let's be explicit, because
Okay.
I forgot to say that part. The phone home, it's just like E.T., right? E.T., the alien, was trying to phone home the whole movie. He wanted to call home, and the reason he wanted to call home so bad is because he's like, come pick me up. I'm stuck here, right? It's like, I'm alive, come get me. And he wanted to phone home. A digital identity system that phones home is one that does exactly what you just said. When you go present your digital identity to the liquor store, the wine store, or you're just logging on to do anything, maybe you're just playing a game somewhere, you go to log in. In order to verify your identity, it goes and checks back with home. What's home? In our case, the MDL, home is the state of Utah. Now, right now, there's a surrogate, a private company called Get Mobile, that's providing the service on behalf of the state of Utah. But there's a check that goes back to a database and says, hey, I have an identity presented to me. Is this really Jason? And the response comes back and says, yes, that's Jason. That's a real legitimate digital identity. Go ahead. That's a thumbs up. Or it could be a thumbs down. Like, we don't recognize that. So it's a thumbs up or a thumbs down on what's been presented. And that phone home is what gives the opportunity for surveillance. There's two things required for surveillance. One, you need to know who's doing the checking, right? The liquor store, the wine store, the gaming outfit, whoever it is, whatever you're shopping, the rental car place, whatever it is, the bank. And who are they checking? Whose identity are they checking? So if it's Jason that's logging into his bank, if I know Jason is logging into his bank, I know the time, the date, and sometimes the location, Jason is logging into his bank, I can now track Jason. If I don't know what he's logging into, if I know it's Jason, but I don't know it's the bank, that makes surveillance pretty hard. If I know it's the bank, but I don't know it's Jason, that makes surveillance really hard. It breaks surveillance if I don't know either of those things. So it takes those two things. I need to know that it's Jason going into the bank. And the phone home, when the bank checks back with the state and says, hey, this identity looks like it's from Jason. Is it really Jason? And the state comes back and says yes or no. Now the state knows Jason is getting into his bank. Does that make sense? That's how phone home works.
Yeah. What do you think about that, Chelsea?
Can I actually, I was thinking, can I play just a couple quick, 30 seconds? I've played these before on another one, but this again is from the two guys that Cox appointed once HB 471 was passed, where all of our, verifiable credentials, digital wallet, everything going digital is going onto the blockchain. And this is specifically what they said. So,
and this is something again during the pandemic.
Let me rewind that.
Now the problem with these physical credentials, and this is something again during the pandemic, there was a lot of people who got really concerned about health status, right? And they wanted you to have a physical piece of paper to go places. That doesn't scale. It's very easy for somebody to fake that. It has no validity, and you just can't produce a ton of them in a rapid way.
So these are Cox's guys with this specific program talking about how if we move to digital, we can't be faking paper vaccine passports, and how they can't produce those in mass with paper. And so I think this is important. And then here's the one with where government can issue and they can revoke it whenever they want.
Digital credentials, we can issue them just as fast as we can enter the data, right? So we can scale them up when we need to. An important part is they're revocable. These are issued by the government, so they should be revocable by the government.
Right. So these are the conversations that they're having, and I thought it was interesting, even just bringing up, the Jews and tracking. IBM was actually an organization that was very involved with helping the punch cards that they used to, where they worked, who their parents were. They kept track of all these things to figure out, are they half Jew, are they quarter Jew? IBM is actually one of the organizations that is partnered with this blockchain system, again, which is. Yeah, and they're very involved with the zero trust. So again, in putting all of these mobile driver's license programs globally onto this global UN, blockchain system, what they're talking about is eventually for all of our safety implementing that. And we've talked about it before. I can show some slides on the screen again for you guys to look at. But eventually implementing this zero trust. I don't know if you've read about zero trust, but eventually, in order to be able to trust everybody, there can be zero trust, and everybody's going to have to show who they are all the time. And it's just this, look at what China is doing, look at what Hitler did, and now we have artificial intelligence and zero trust that we're implementing into this system, and it's just all of that on steroids. It's really scary, actually.
Yeah, and this is why I really appreciate you coming on. I think it's an important time to have a conversation because, the world is changing so fast. And I think the average person who's, caught up in football and the latest, rivalry is folks and raising their kids and just being busy. Meanwhile, we're not paying attention, and we're seeing these things are being implemented by people who do have agendas, and I do not trust their agendas. I think, and if we don't start paying attention and having conversations in the public square, you have these people who are coming to your legislators and saying, "Hey, this is where the world's going. This is what is needed, and if you want to keep up with the rest of the states, and if you want Utah to not be in the dark ages, you want Utah to be, in the cutting edges of things, which Utah seems to be so excited about being progressive. You need to be adopting these things." And then they're coming out doing surveys. So, Chelsea's talked about this, and Vision Utah is a good example of this is what the people want. And surely there are people that want this because they don't understand the consequences. So I just think that the world is changing so fast with AI. We saw what happened just a few years ago with COVID and the dangers of government and how quickly they assume power and also the danger of just the sheep in general, just to give it to them. So I just think this is a very important time to start thinking about where we're going with mobile driver's license. Is this something you're comfortable with? Are you comfortable with, let's say there's this egg shortage. I mean, it's probably, they have the, in theory, with this technology, would they have the ability, you buy too many eggs, all of a sudden you're on the list of no more eggs? Is that the type of possibility that we're moving into?
Yes. And I mean, they're pushing, we've seen it, no meat, no dairy. So
tracking everything you do online, tracking everywhere you go. I mean, look, the whole point, that is why our founding fathers valued privacy. It has always been dangerous. And the beautiful thing about the Constitution, it was a group of people said, you know what, government its role is to work for the people, to serve the people, to be below the people. Do we really want to give them access to everything you're doing? Because again, look where the countries that are doing that, and freedom is disappearing. So what else should people know? Because I want to jump into some solutions, because Timothy's actually been working on some solutions to slow this down and to put some roadblocks on. But before we do that, what other concerns should the people have about what's currently out there? You mentioned that $500,000 has been allocated recently to expand the mobile driver's license as it currently is. What else? We talked about phone home. What else should people be concerned about what is in play now if we don't put some safeguards around it?
I completely agree with your characterization of where this can go and how bad it can be. And I want to add a little bit more color.
Okay.
There has never been the capability of surveillance that a broad government-based digital surveillance system can bring to the world. China is showing the way. China is showing, I'm not saying a good way, they're showing the way of what it can be with all the cameras everywhere, but also all the transactions, the ability to turn off people's ability to spend, the ability to turn off people's ability to travel, the ability to turn off their heat, the ability to do all kinds of things to control. It was insane what they were able to do to their population during the COVID lockdowns. And there's a trend that even in Utah that we're not going to escape, and this will kind of go into my philosophy for how we need to manage the risk here. The thing that I don't think we can escape is the digital transformation.
Yeah.
More and more things are going to go digital. And there's people who would say, well, we don't need digital identity, and I'm not going to use my mobile phone and just kind of, I'm sorry, I'm going to use this metaphor of just saying I'm going to pretend it's not happening. I'm going to extricate myself. But the reality is it's a generational thing. Our kids are growing up as digital natives. And if you look at the polls, the current young generation, Gen Z, they value Bitcoin as much as they value gold. If you look at the older generation, they value gold more than they value Bitcoin. But when you grow up and you learn about Bitcoin from a very young age, you're going to think, well, I hear about it as much as I hear about gold. Sounds about the same to me. And so this is just going to keep going. The more the digital transformation of our lives continues, the greater the threat of surveillance becoming control to block us from something that somebody's decided they don't want us to do. There is a point in time, we have a window of time to stop this. Before the transition, I tell you, there's this major transition of all of our digital identities being provided by private companies.
Yeah.
All the hundreds of different digital identities. You know what's going to happen? Mark my words. When government gives us very strong verifiable credentials, which verifiable credentials are not inherently bad. It's how they're signed, it's how they're used, it's how they're verified is where the problem. But when government gives us verifiable credentials that are much stronger than any password, they're much stronger than any username we ever had, much better than using my email address everywhere. I have a government credential that I can use. Every website is going to say, just use your credential here, use it here. And who wouldn't want to get rid of their hundreds of usernames and passwords and replace it with one credential given by the government that's useful everywhere? Mark my words, that usefulness will happen. And what it will mean is we will be using our government-issued credentials, maybe not you, but a large percentage of the population, because it's going to be so convenient, will use their government-issued digital credentials everywhere on the internet. And if we don't do something now, if we don't put an alternative to systems that have phone home capabilities on the table now, Jason, you've seen what happens when government gets power. It doesn't relinquish that power. What's happening right now with DOGE and the cutting of the agencies, this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. It may never happen again. So I hope that what's happening right now will happen as deep and as far as they possibly can do it to shrink government as much as possible, because I've never in my lifetime seen government get smaller. It always gets bigger.
Well, it's not just our lifetime. It's history has shown that.
Yeah.
And I think we need more time to bear out to see what actually happens here.
Yeah. So the answer is there's got to be an alternative. And right now, for government identity, the thing that's winning support from Apple, it's winning support from Google, is the MDL. And it's what's happening all over the world, too. That's the other thing that puts on pressure. There's an international standard that a whole bunch of countries have come together, and they've said, if you have a surveillance system, we will use it. If you don't have a surveillance capability in this identity system, we won't use it. So they had to put it in the standard. It's baked into the international standard. It's called ISO 18013, baked into the standard to have a surveillance capability. If we didn't have it, some of these countries wouldn't use it. And so to have interoperable identity all over the world, it got baked in. So right now, it's the only serious alternative on the table. And it is being adopted by state after state. And in Utah, a lot of people don't even know it's available. 100,000 people have figured out that it is and have it. But it's only useful in a couple of places. But now this $500,000 comes through, this newly appropriated $500,000, explicitly to expand the usefulness of the MDL for online shopping and banking and rental cars and the rest of our everyday lives. It's the beginning of having phone home capabilities for a government-issued digital identity in all of our everyday online activities. So it is the end game. It's the beginning of that scary thing that you said that I also fear. Now, the people that would be having a hard time with what I just said, the people in the digital identity system that believe they are pro-privacy and they are pro-MDL would say most of the time it's not implemented in surveillance mode, it's implemented in privacy mode. And some of them say, oh, yeah, we get the data, but we delete it. By law, we delete it, and we don't look at it.
And
we
I
don't
trust the
store it.
government. I trust the government.
Yeah,
I mean, the government's never done anything.
I totally trust all of you.
So let's talk about, so that's the bad news. There is some good news.
Okay, yeah,
let's switch to good news.
Yeah, so tell us what you have been working on to restrain and protect and to put what you've been working on.
There are technologies that frankly are the inspiration behind this new bill that just passed in Utah that we all should be, every privacy lover should applaud, SB 260 that just passed unanimously. And this is a very good thing because it established principles. It doesn't create a new digital identity system. It establishes principles that if the state chooses to, and the state needs to, I know we don't want a digital identity system, but if we don't put a privacy-respecting digital identity system as an alternative in the market, the MDL is just going to continue marching and marching and marching and growing and growing. There has to be an opposition to it. There has to be a second choice. Right now, there's no second choice. Utah's going to put the first second choice on the map. This principle bill, 260, lays out the principles so that we can later, maybe next year, come out with something that is an alternative that doesn't have phone home capability. Not latent, not existent. It just does not. So without getting into technical details, it gives us the ability to have a digital identity that is strongly verifiable by the liquor company, by the bank, by the gaming company. Anywhere you want to use your digital identity, they can verify the credential that you presented without phoning home. That's the key. Okay. No phone home.
So in other words, it would be an ID on your phone, but there would be no way for the government to ever have access to seeing where you're using it, where you're going, what you're shopping, anything.
That is correct. They will have no visibility to your use or even your continued possession of that credential. You could throw it away, and the state has no visibility to you even having it or using it ever again. Once they've given it to you, they've given it to you.
And there would be no way they could get access to that?
Other than physically taking it off of your person. No. Now, we should talk about revocation. You talked about revocation. when we have a credential given to us in physical world, a passport, a driver's license, the state that issued that does retain the legal ability to revoke it. Now, if they revoke, like my passport just expired, does that mean the feds come and physically take my passport from me because it expired? No, I still haven't expired. I carry it around. I carry around the physical passport even though it's expired. If I drive drunk and I get my driver's license revoked, they don't come and take it away from me physically. I still have it. I can carry it around. I can prove my identity. I can do things with it. It's just in the state database that it's marked that I've had my driver's license revoked, but they physically didn't come take it away. That is what we need to replicate in the digital realm, is that they don't physically come and take away a credential, but they do need the ability to revoke it. And how you can revoke a digital credential without phoning home is frankly the breakthrough. There is a breakthrough in the technology of digital identity that enables a state to issue a credential that's verifiable and still revocable by the state without a phone home. I know that sounds crazy, and we can talk about it in greater technical detail, but the capability for revocation, it may be controversial, but when you think about the way it needs to work legally with physical credentials, it's actually the same thing. We just want the digital to do the same thing that the physical does.
I think my bigger concern with the revocation is, again, them moving this onto the blockchain in a public-private partnership sense, right?
Don't need blockchain. Blockchain's a waste of time. It's a dead end, and it's not the right way to do things.
Right.
Chelsea, what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I'm super excited about it. And look, I know that there's a lot of those who had seen this bill who they understand the dangers of digital identity and they kind of freaked out about this. The reality is, like Tim has said, is that the digital ID, it is here. This digital transformation is here. It's here to stay. It's not my first choice. I don't love it. I would prefer that this is not the direction that we go in. However, it is here. And though we have tried to stop it, we're not going to succeed. We're not going to succeed at shutting it down. So the next best thing we can do is be successful in how we steer it and kind of starve out the system.
Steer it in a positive direction that respects privacy and liberty. And if Utah does not, I'm telling you, no other states are this far along. If Utah does not put forth an alternative soon, like the next year, we don't have 2 years to wait. Next year, if we don't put out, here's how you do identity in a privacy respecting way, we may lose the window. We may lose the opportunity.
The other thing I want to point out, maybe you can talk to this more, is the material privilege. Because there was an option in there also where it was like, hey, this is an opt-in option. You still have to provide like just a physical identity option. And we talked a little bit about material privilege and what that means and kind of how we're trying to attack that. So would you mind elaborating on that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. There's got to be, let me start over. There cannot be any material advantage for someone using a digital identity instead of a physical one. So physical needs to still work. Now, there's limitations to that statement. I can't use my physical identity to go into a website and log in. Right? There's things physical things can do that you would never expect things a digital identity can do that you would never expect a physical identity to be able to do, like use on a computer, right? But there is I can't remember, some parks pass. There was an annual parks pass you can get in the state of Utah that if you get the physical one, it goes by calendar. And so if you get it in June, you only get it for the rest of the year. But if you get the digital one, you get 12 months. And so there's a material advantage to the digital versus the physical.
You're basically penalized if you don't go digital. Exactly.
You're penalized using paper versus digital. So this bill, this is a kudos to the guys who wrote the bill. You mentioned earlier, I gave some advice to the people writing the bill. I didn't write the bill.
They were great.
There's drafters who are pros and know how to write that kind of stuff, but I consulted with them for the last 2 years, and they took a lot of my ideas, and I'm excited about how it turned out. But there's something that we should all be very proud that Utah did, is they put something in this bill, explicitly said that there can be no advantage to using digital over physical. So those who still want to say with all the physical, they're going to be just fine.
So help me understand this. So we currently have the current digital ID mobile driver's license that is out there is a surveillance nightmare in in my opinion, from what we've talked about with the phone home capabilities and the power it gives the state to build their database and surveil us. You've been working with some legislators on this. It's not a bill. Is it a bill? I guess it is a bill, right? A bill that would say, hey, if we have digital ID, it must have these parameters. We must always give people the right to opt out. They must always have the right to. It must not have the ability to phone home. In other words, we can't create a database with it. We can't. The government can have no access to what we're doing with it. So you're put together a bill that would put these parameters on digital ID. If the state has digital ID, which it does, that bill passed. Correct.
Correct.
What now happens to the current mobile driver's license that has these phone home capabilities and this new money that's been allocated to it?
Nothing. It continues on as it is.
So it does
right
not
now,
change the current.
Doesn't
so the current
change anything
thing
about the current.
with the state collecting all that data is still going on.
What the new bill says is if the state creates a state-endorsed digital identity program, it has to have these parameters. So it's kicking the can down the road, but what that did is it made it so that we weren't asking for too much in one bill, because it would be politically dangerous to try to ask for too much in one bill. So the first bill says, if we do a program, it's going to have these principles. And you look down the list of principles, it's we are the people down the line. It's individuals control their own identity. There can't be any surveillance. You can't have any advantage of digital over paper. I mean, you read the bill,
I've read it.
The chorus is singing in the background, singing the national anthem. It's a beautiful thing. Tying that with establishing all the details of a whole new program would have been a big ask. And so the details of a whole new program, we need to do that next year. And there's a lot of work to be done to create a program and fund it. And it's like, here's what it's going to be, here's what it can do, here's what it won't do. But now the principles are there, so we now have guardrails about what this can do and what it can't. Until that new system is conceived and the technology to do it right exists, and that's the exciting thing. There is the technology to do this right, exists, but we have to conceive this. What does the state program look like? Until that happens, and I don't know how aggressive politicians want to be about using that moment to make the current thing illegal. So the state of things right now today with that bill passing, the MDL is not illegal. It keeps going. As a matter of fact, it's getting bigger. It just got another $500,000 to get more into our lives.
Yep.
It just keeps going. And now we have principles, but next year there's going to be a program that is a new alternative where Utah leads out, and hopefully it's not just Utah. Hopefully we can get some other states to join us in saying here's an alternative to the phone home system. And at that time, it's going to be a political decision by people who are smarter than me and about how aggressive we are in undoing what's already there.
And just a note to those who, part of the game that they play with some of these bills is they'll, for instance, just hypothetically, right, there will be a bill that comes out and says, oh, it's limiting the global tracking, surveillance system to only 200,000 per year, right? And then when you read the bill, it's like, wait a minute, this is actually creating the global tracking system and you're putting money in there. So the bills can be a little bit deceiving. And I know that there are people that are concerned that, well, this is being done under the guise of, oh, it's for, freedom-loving privacy protections, but you're still creating the digital ID in this mobile driver's license. That's not, it's already in place. Like you said, there's already people that have opted in and have it. It's already a thing. So this is not creating it. Again, this is just steering it in the right direction. And it doesn't mean that we don't stop fighting to keep that right to carry just a physical ID and not opt in. This is supposed to be an opt-in option as well, correct? So,
correct. Yeah.
So
not mandatory.
It doesn't mean that we don't stop fighting for our physical ID option so that we don't have to opt into this system. This is just a way to make what they've already put in place safer. So just
100%
throwing that out there.
Any closing thoughts from the two of you on this?
I would just like to give a quick thought out to our represented or our elected representatives is I know that a lot of you think that this technology and this innovation and this modernization is great and we want Utah to lead the way, and a lot of you just want, I think there are nefarious people up there, but a lot of you just want our economy to be great and for us to be able to progress with this digital transformation. But I would ask you again, we talked about culture. Don't be so naive to think that because we're not China that, we don't have nefarious people that are looking to undermine our freedoms with these kind of systems. And the systems that you are building out, even though you may mean well with it, you are creating an infrastructure and a kind of a centralized system that what happens if when you leave, you have somebody with a Stalin mindset or a Hitler mindset inherit these systems? So just food for thought. Please keep that in mind.
Thank you. Timothy?
Yeah, I want to, first of all, just express my gratitude. And I am super impressed with Utah leaders for being able to not only get behind something new and different. There is no legislation like this in the world. This SB 260 and last year, HB 491, that privacy bill, I don't know, we don't appreciate it. So I know Utah maybe tries to lead out in some things and maybe says more than they actually do in some cases. I'm just telling you, from my position in the world of digital identity, what Utah did with that privacy bill last year, unprecedented. It binds the hands of government. There has never been a piece of legislation that I've ever seen in the world, privacy legislation, that binds the hand of government. I mean, you look at what's happening in Europe, they're trying to bind big tech. We said we didn't even mention private industry in this bill. It was just binding government. That is totally unique. And then this new bill saying that people have their own identities and the state just endorses them and there can't be any surveillance. I mean, this doesn't exist. This is groundbreaking. And so we need to stop every once in a while. It's important to be critical and hold our politicians to the highest standard that we possibly can. But I think this is one of those moments where we need to applaud them and say, good job, Utah. Keep going. This is the right thing to do, to lead out and do things no one's ever done that encourage liberty and start to put an end to surveillance capabilities. That's a really good thing.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on here, because I will say this, I am firmly against digital ID because of the way the world is using it, and because of where the surveillance state is going and the potential dangers it has. And I will say, what Utah currently has is exactly, the dystopian type of digital ID we should be concerned about. So I'm cautiously optimistic about this piece of legislation. And I just think it's very important. And it is, and I think the fact of the matter is we are very critical of our politicians on this show. And the fact of the matter is that's the role of the media. And the sad thing is the media in this state does not do that. There is no criticism of our politicians. There's nobody scrutinizing. Tell me where there's been any scrutiny of this stuff. Has KSL been scrutinizing the mobile driver's license, the flock, the tracking with the flock camera system? I mean, has KSL been exposing any of the corruption with China or smart cities? Has Deseret News? How about the Trib? Who is criticizing government? And that's the problem, and that's why we feel such a need to be critical, because the fact of the matter is that is the whole purpose of the First Amendment, was to protect journalists from exposing politicians and corruption, because we know it is the nature of all people in power to run towards corruption. And, so this is very important to our audience and to you, especially as next year, this legislation season is coming to an end. These things will come up again. And our politicians are going to be making decisions, but I really think this is not about our politicians. It's about you. And I just want to remind us what this country is founded upon. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, not by their government. That among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. The government gets its authority from you. They work for you, when we forget that. And I think our government has been flipped upside down, where it's now God, the people, or God, the state, and the people. No. It's supposed to be God, the people, and the state. And it's been flipped over to the state and the people below that.
You're just in where we've been mode.
Yes, but then he says this, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, which I would say our government has been dramatically moving towards that way, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government. And look, fact of the matter is this is your country. This is your children's inheritance. These are in conversations that need to be had in the public square. They're not being had in the public square, which is why we're trying to do this, and which is why I appreciate bringing Timothy and his great perspective. He's in the trenches on this stuff. He sees both sides. But ultimately, this is not about my opinion or Chelsea's or Timothy's, and it's definitely not your politician's opinion that matters. It's yours, because this is your country, and our children are going to live the consequences. So anyways, thank you, Timothy, for joining us. I hope anywhere people can find you if they want to follow you or your work. Or...
Website is digitaltrust.vc.
Okay.
Email is timothy@digitaltrust.vc.
And Chelsea, where can people find you?
Here.
We love Chelsea. Thank you guys for everything you do. Hope you have conversations about this, about other issues with your friends. This matters so much more than football. It matters so much more than entertainment. And we're coming to a time where I think people are starting to sit back and say, we don't need to worry about it because some powerful leader is going to fix all our problems for you. And I'll tell you, that is not how liberty or how God works. So please be diligent in caring and paying attention, because ultimately it's us that are responsible for our freedoms, not the people we elect. God bless you guys, and we'll see you on the next one.